Okay, folks, good afternoon and welcome. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome Rachel here this afternoon to have a conversation with you in terms of, CV boosting leadership skills. Okay. Rachel has put, as you've seen, the link in the chat bar there in terms of the forms. It's a quick, literally a 5 question ticky box exercise to kind of get a feel for what your thoughts are in terms of leadership and what it is and where you are in terms of your own developmental journey in relation to leadership skills. So if you could take a second or two to do that. These questions are perfect. Great idea. Excellent. Okay. Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. And again, this is about being engaging. Okay. And again, as Rachel had said there before we started the recording, feel free to put your cameras on, folks, to get that kind of community of learning going there at the end of the day. What I want to do is put a quick Menti, just copy and paste it into the sidebar here, into the chat bar. If people could go to that link that I've just put in the chat bar there, it's literally a 1 question. Um, what examples of leadership have you shown thus far in your life? And again, you can take a minute or two to complete that, and it's for our own evaluation in terms of us within employability and careers who have organised this Future Skills Week. So that's there for you, and you can do that now as we progress along. If anybody has any issues, just raise your hand or whack your camera, whack your mic on, and feel free to speak up. So today's session, then, Rachel's here to talk about CV boosting leadership skills, what they are, and how to develop them. Again, the future of work looks very different than it does today. Digitization, non-linear career paths, sought after soft skills means leadership capability is in demand by employers across all sectors. But what is leadership? What does effective leadership look like? And importantly, how can you develop your leadership skills with the intention to give your employability a boost? Sandra's just put on brilliant, Sandra. I can't put my camera on because I'm painting while listening to you. I'm wondering, is that you're painting a room or are you doing some sort of artistic painting, Sandra? is it home decoration or is it oils or watercolors on canvas? I have this impression now. Okay, so moving on then, I would like to hand over to Rachel and take it from there, Rachel.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much for Ulster University for having me along today. It is a topic that is very close to my heart and one that I'm very passionate and enthusiastic about. The point of today's session, CV boosting leadership skills. Leadership is quite a broad and quite complex subject when you get into it. So I'm hoping, difficult to know where everyone is at on this call in terms of their own leadership journey and their own skill development. But I'm really hopeful that by the end of today's session, you'll know a bit more about some of the key leadership skills. I can't cover them all in one session. We'll be looking at 5 today. And hopefully be armed with some of the tools that you can use, be it links or resources, to start developing your leadership skills right away. That is the plan for today. So before we get started today in this session, I have popped in before, but I will just pop it in again in case anyone has just joined and missed it, a quick link, or a link to a quick survey, I should say. 5 questions, totally anonymous. I'll use your responses throughout the presentation just for a bit of audience participation and engagement, but it would be really useful if you could take 30 seconds to complete a multiple choice survey. And very briefly, I'm going to touch on the part that us presenters all love to hate, which is to talk a bit about me. So super quick, graduated from Ulster University in 2012, spent 11 years in the engineering and manufacturing sectors. And I've kind of done a bit of everything. Been a marketing manager, a health and safety manager, which I don't think I want to repeat, a human resources manager, environmental. So typically what is known today as a portfolio career, that's definitely becoming more and more common and wasn't my intention, but here we are. Currently completing a master's degree with Ulster in executive leadership, which I highly recommend for anyone who is considering a future in leadership. I just hope my dissertation supervisor isn't on the call today because I may have a dissertation that is due. absolute advocate myself of lifelong learning and skill development, and over the years have become involved in developing apprenticeship programs, mentoring young people. And in February last year, I delivered a TED Talk called Why We Need to Disrupt Careers Education. Yes, it is available to watch on YouTube, should you want to check it out. And in April last year, I was appointed managing director of a social enterprise startup called For Sheer Future. We gamified careers, and we are delivering 11 events as an at-scale pilot in June 22, reaching 7,500 Year 9 pupils hopefully this year. And in September, we're launching Northern Ireland's first careers portal. So quick final call on that survey, the link in the chat box that I'll use throughout the presentation, and then we can move on to the next section. Also, if anyone has any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to pop them into the chat box. I'll see, hopefully we have time for a little bit of Q&A at the end, but I'll not stop too much in between the flow, because we've got quite a bit to cover in today's session. So one of the first questions in the survey is that you're confident that you know what leadership is. A little bit of a mix in the responses. We had 26 responses to the survey, which is great, and about half are on number 4. They're on the 5-point scale to say that they're confident they know what leadership is, which is great. There's a little bit of variance in between. So we're just going to briefly touch on making sure that we're comfortable that we know what leadership is before we try to develop leadership skills. So leadership isn't a new concept at all. It's been around for a really, really long time, but academically, it's been studied for about 200 years. But even though it's been studied for that long, there's not one definition of what leadership is or what good or effective leadership is. And over time, that concept has changed and evolved. So a lot of the leadership and even some of the business terminology that we use today has its origins in the military. And it makes sense then that in the 1940s, leadership was defined as a position of control and power. But by the 1980s, it was more about being influential and inspiring others to achieve goals. So the concept of leadership has continued to evolve. And today we see a wide range of leadership styles. There's charismatic leaders, there's values-based leadership, which has become very popular, that promotes ethics as the core of leadership practice. And of course, we still see some leaders who act in domineering ways to maintain their power and control. So the question is, what does good leadership look like to you? So through studying leadership, I had to develop my own definition for what good leadership looks like to me. And for each of you, it may be slightly different. For me, leadership is using defined values to influence others towards achieving shared goals while supporting them in achieving their individual potential. I think that's a really important aspect for me, is it's not just about achieving the organizational goals, it's about making sure that individuals have opportunity as well. So a great starting point for you guys will be to determine what good or great leadership looks like to you, because then you can move towards developing those skills to try and either in the first instance emulate them, and then get comfortable with your own leadership style. So a couple of things I've done throughout the presentation today is include what I call action points. So different ways that you can go away and take some actions away from this session to immediately start looking at developing your skills. Examples of leaders, we see them in our communities. It's not just about business and politics or even sport. So you could look for examples of leaders that you admire and would like to, in the first instance, replicate. I feel like to develop those skills, sometimes we copy first and before we get comfortable with our own style. Certainly, I use a lot of TED Talks, great free resource. One of my favorites is Simon Sinek's How Great Leaders Inspire Action. There's plenty of resource out there. Things like Masterclass are a paid for resource, but there's a lot out there for free as well, a lot of goodness to be had. And in case you can tell behind me, I happen to be a reader, so I will recommend books throughout the presentation, but audiobooks and podcasts and similar are equally as valid for learning. It's just reading tends to be my personal style. So a few recommendations there. I hope Norman will be sending the attendees today a PDF presentation, so that the links and recommendations, you'll be able to have those. But if you do want to take a note of them, that's perfectly fine. In terms of what leadership is, one of the questions that we had asked in the survey was what leadership includes, what you think leadership is. So out of the now 28 responses, we've got 90% of you think it's about being confident, We have about 85% of you think it's about being competent and capable in the role, which sometimes goes hand in hand with being confident. If you know and you're confident that you know what you're doing. 65% of you think it's being comfortable giving orders and telling people what to do, which is really interesting. Definitely an interesting distinction sometimes between management and leadership, but there's still an element of having to be able to direct others, I suppose. Only 17% of you think that it's about persuading other people that your way is the best way to do it, which is really interesting, because if leadership is about influencing groups of individuals towards shared goals, another word for influencing could be persuading. And ultimately, as the leader, while you would take on board feedback and input from other individuals, it's often that the decision-making process will rest ultimately with the leader, and therefore that's the way you've chosen. So that's really interesting. 82% think it's about being accountable for the decisions that you make, which is very valid. Whopping big 96% think it's about supporting or inspiring others to be the best they can be. So it seems like a lot of people on this call hold the same or a similar definition of leadership as I do. Only 64% think it's about being able to articulate an inspiring vision for the future. So a lot of what leadership is about is being able to share a really complex and compelling vision for the future, but being able to articulate it in a way that your shareholders, your stakeholders, or indeed your followers or employees can understand, and giving them the same passion to want to achieve that vision also. So that's a really important one. Only one person out of 28 thinks that leadership, sorry, this is something that they've actually put in themselves. This is an additional comment, which is great. And they believe it's about being inspirational and charismatic, having excellent communication skills, being disciplined, focused, and devoted. Have you attended my presentation before? That's fantastic. That's a really great insight. So getting stuck into the specifics about leadership skills and attributes, there's two really interesting sides of leadership for me. One is the skills that can be learned, and one is the attributes or the personality traits. There has been an argument for a long time with the leaders are born or leaders are made. And interestingly too, in terms of your guys' feedback, we have a bit of a split. We think just over 55% of you guys think that great leaders are made, and it takes effort and practice to become a great leader, which is fantastic. No one thinks that leaders are born, which is really interesting, because possibly in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, it was, great man theory was what it was termed, and it was that leaders were born with these innate skills. But interestingly, about 43% think it's a mixture of both, which is really interesting. So that's usually where your personality traits and your charisma and those types of things come into it. For me, I do think that there is what would be called more natural leaders, or that there are individuals who without trying very hard, get others to, are able to influence and inspire others. And I think that does come from certain traits, but a lot of recent and more modern neuroscience research has looked into the fact that your personality isn't static. Your personality traits aren't, set in stone, and that actually you can develop and hone your traits as well in terms of self-confidence and taking responsibility and all of those things. I'm just getting a comment in there about like when someone looks at you to do something because no one else wants to do it. Sadly, in the realities, management and leadership, it can be the case that it's trying to explain. I think for me, if you're trying to not that you want to get someone to do something that no one wants to do, but there's lots of jobs and tasks that none of us enjoy doing, but they're part and parcel of the job, or they need to be done. And I think a lot of the time, if you take the time to explain why that is important and how that fits into the bigger picture, people are usually a lot more accommodating in doing tasks that they may not necessarily enjoy, not all of the time, but because they understand the contribution that they're making to the bigger picture. So leadership skills, if you Google what are leadership skills, you'll get over 2 billion results. And from a lot of the textbooks and researchers in theory, no one seems to be able to define a specific set of what they look like. It's incredibly broad. not every leader will have all of the skill sets, and certainly some are much more competent in a range than others. For me, effective leadership is a number of different skills that you can dial up or down depending on the situation and when you need them. So the good news is a lot of the skills that are involved in leadership are in demand by employers in the future of work anyway. So working on developing those will still give your CV a boost, even if you're not in the position of wanting to take on a leadership role, essentially just right now. So the first leadership skill that I'm going to talk about today, and the skills today are in no particular order except for maybe this one, and that is emotional intelligence. So maybe heard a bit more about this in recent years. It's a relatively new concept in relation to how it impacts on leadership in comparison to the body of work on leadership. But it's very widely accepted that individuals with higher levels of emotional intelligence have higher levels of leadership capability. And that's a really important word in terms of the capability and the potential for leadership within individuals, as opposed to people just being ready-made leaders. It's actually believed to be a distinguishing factor of top performing leaders, and it is a skill that can be developed with effort and practice. So the 5 by Goleman, who is an authoritative voice on emotional intelligence, the 5 competencies for emotional intelligence that he lists are self-awareness, which is being aware of how you're feeling and behaving; self-regulation, which is managing your emotions and behaviors; motivation, which is figuring out what makes you tick and the internal drive that you have to achieve goals, or to achieve objectives or make a change or a difference; empathy, which is a really important one, being able to relate to other people and different situations and seeing them from different perspectives; and social skills, which is how we interact and communicate with each other, be that your body language, be it through eye contact, and today, be it in person or digitally. So emotional intelligence, if we define it as the ability to understand and manage your own emotions and those of the people around you, it might sound quite straightforward, but it's actually a lot of the times more complex than you would think and can be a learned skill. So it means responding to the situations and your environment. So taking that second to process and digest the situation or the information and responding to it instead of reacting. So you're in control of your emotions and actions instead of letting them control you. And unfortunately, Will Smith kindly provided a recent example of how not to use emotional intelligence. In terms of developing them for yourself and learning more about them, there are some free tools available online. Mind Tools have an emotional intelligence quiz. A great place to start with emotional intelligence is to get an understanding of your baseline, of where you're starting from. True feedback on emotional intelligence involves other people, often providing you with feedback that you can try to learn and grow from. It can be a little difficult to do if you don't have the resources or tools for people to be able to do that anonymously and provide some feedback. But again, lots of TED Talks out there and information and resources on the likes of Harvard Business Review. And also, as usual with me, some book recommendations as well. So we really encourage you to take a look at emotional intelligence and see if that is something that you would like to develop. So the second and really important key leadership skill is communication, which someone had mentioned in the free question answer on the survey. So communication is absolutely key in all aspects of business, probably also in all aspects of our personal lives. With technology today, we have so many ways to communicate. There's Slack, there's WhatsApp, there's Facebook Messenger. I could name many more. Other brands are available. So you would think then that if there's so many ways to communicate, we've probably got it figured out. But actually, I think that makes it more complex. I think there's so many different channels for communication that it's easy for messages to get lost. And also, how we communicate digitally isn't the same as how we communicate in person or in formal situations or in writing. So the communication skills that are needed aren't just sort of one mode of getting the message across. It's also about listening and actively listening to what the other person is saying and responding appropriately and with meaning. So communication isn't just about putting your message out there, it's about receiving messages back. It is definitely one of the most in-demand soft skills today by employers, and it's regularly a pain point that's identified in organisations. You'll often hear staff complaining that management don't communicate enough with them, they don't know what's going on in the organisation. The rule of thumb is communication, communication, communication. So that's something that's really important to think about, as well as the most appropriate method of communication. So it is a skill that a lot of us learn in the workplace at the start, in terms of, is it appropriate to send an email, or is a phone call sufficient, or is it quick, just a quick pop into someone's office to run an idea past them, which was a real challenge with remote working in terms of collaboration and teamwork, because there were these physical barriers to being able to communicate really quickly. And although a lot of global organizations seem to be able to do it reasonably effectively, there is that issue that for a lot of us, it's not natural to try and collaborate or communicate in this sort of remote manner, not having physical whiteboards or post-it notes, or the ability to sketch something to show someone what you mean. So those are challenges that we're trying to overcome currently right now. For some organizations, they will go back to predominantly in-person working, but for others, they're making decisions not to. So that will be a challenge for the organization to overcome. And in turn, it means that the employees need to have adaptability, and also need to learn new ways of communicating and methods of working. And that includes leadership right the way down through the organization. So communication, in terms of action points on how you can develop those. First of all, figure out what your own communication style is. We actually have very different communication styles, and you'll find if someone else, particularly someone you're either answering up to or responsible for, has a very different communication style than you, then you'll find a lot of barriers or miscommunications happening. And it could be because you are particularly strong as a visual communicator, and that other person is maybe better with written communication. So definitely figuring out what your own communication style is, and potentially trying to work out then what others are. It's quite easy to spot when you get used to it. If people say phrases like, show me what that would look like, then they're usually a visual communicator. And if they say things like, does that sound good? Then they're usually either a written or oral, which is sound communication. So that's a really powerful tool to know that in the workplace, is what type of communicator am I communicating with, and how can I best get my message across. Again, with some TED Talks, fantastic free resources. How to Speak So That People Will Listen is a really entertaining and short TED Talk, and a powerful one, particularly for women in leadership, but in general, is Amy Cuddy's talk that has been massively popular, and it's basically about something called power poses. So that's the importance of body language in your communication. It's a terrible cliche, and one that everyone hates to hear, but cliches are usually true for a reason, and that is to practice your skills. If you want to become a better writer, start writing. If you want to become a better presenter or verbal communicator, offer to do a presentation. Most people get a dry mouth, they get clammy hands, and they sometimes get so nervous they get the shakes. But the only way to break down those barriers is to practice and put yourself in those uncomfortable situations. You can start small by going to a networking event and introducing yourself to people. You can offer to give a presentation to a small team in your workplace. I usually find presenting to strangers is actually easier than people that you know. And when I first started, I hated public speaking. I used to get the dry mouth and the sweaty hands and lose my train of thought. And that was sort of 8 years ago. And I knew that if I wanted to develop as a leader and to get into leadership positions, I would need to get real comfortable real fast with being able to communicate that way. And ultimately gave a TED Talk last year. So if I can do it, trust me, anyone can. Again, a few book recommendations. They'll be dispersed in throughout the presentation, just for those of you who are a bit of a bookworm like myself. I just see there someone's not seeing the slides in the chat, but hopefully Norman can do that okay. Just want to make sure everyone can see them.
I don't understand. Sorry to interrupt you there, Rachel. I don't understand why they can't see them, to be honest with you. Somebody's put in, say, maybe the video tab is expanded. I'm not entirely sure what that means. I'm assuming everybody else is able to see the slides okay.
There's a few messages in there to say yes, so I would hope so.
Yes, it's working for me, Norman, Rachel.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
yeah,
perfect.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
well, I'll send
Okay,
this with you. Thank you.
right.
I hope I can maybe entertain you thoroughly with my verbal presentation slides, and maybe when Norman sends them out, it'll just be the resources you can get access then to. Unless maybe you tried leaving the session and coming back in again.
We've tried that.
No,
We're-
sorry, I haven't been able to pay
no,
attention
it's
to the
okay.
messages and
Look, I'm looking after
deliver.
the chat, Rachel. Don't you
No
worry about
problem.
it at all. And I'll have a think about what somebody has mentioned there in terms of maybe the video tab is expanded. Right, leave that with me. You crack on. I apologize.
You get onto the technical part there, Norman. No problem at all. So, third really important skill for leadership, and one that was alluded to in the initial survey in terms of articulating that inspiring vision and potentially persuading other people to work towards that vision or that goal, is setting goals, but more importantly, achieving them. So it may not seem like a skill that needs to be honed and developed, but if you think about how many goals you may have set yourself, New Year's resolutions, September's a popular time as well with the academic year of setting yourself new goals, and how many of them you actually see through to completion. So the completion part of the goal is actually really important, and motivation and maintaining your drive to work towards those goals. And really how you will get that motivation and determination is if you make sure that the goals you set yourself are actually something that you really want. It can be very easy to set these types of goals and they're not really very finely tuned into exactly what you really want, and you don't maybe understand exactly why you want them. Is it parents? Is it your peers? Is it other people telling you that this is what you should be going towards and working for? So therefore you kind of start to do it, but halfway through you realize it might not really be for you and you don't really care enough about it, so you don't achieve them. So there's a whole process. One of the ways you can start to do this is through the SMART method. It's used a lot sort of corporately or in organizations to make sure that the goals that you're setting are really specific. Hone that down into, that you can distill what your goal is in a line or two. Make sure that you've a way to know that you've accomplished it. If you leave it too woolly, well, I might do this, and if I achieve this, then it might be what it's, what the actual goal is. Make sure that you know how you'll know that you've achieved it. Make sure it's actually achievable. Now, some people might argue that the dream big concept, and if you go big or go home, that you can set yourself really long tail goals. And I think that's true, but I think when you're first starting out, to start getting that like reward response, we are psychology and animals after all, to get the reward response, if you start off with a few that are more achievable and more realistic to build up your confidence in the fact that you can set goals and you can achieve them, it usually means then that you're more comfortable and willing to set much bigger, longer term goals when you realize that it is possible. Time bound in corporate land, you're going to set your objectives and you're going to give yourself 6 months or 12 months to achieve them with a very structured plan. We don't tend to do that as much in our personal lives. It might be something worthwhile looking into for you, but I find when I'm thinking of goals in terms of my personal life and what I'd like to achieve, I'm not just as structured with them, but I do have a very firm idea of where I want to go. So setting goals is a really big one. And in terms of developing those skills, I would say definitely pick a couple that are a bit more short term so that you can get the instant gratification, get the buzz of knowing that you can achieve them, and then set some longer term ones. Some people firmly believe in the concept of writing your goals down. Research does suggest you're 42% more likely to achieve your goals if you write them down every day. There's other research that talks about the percentage chance of you achieving them if you share them with others to hold yourself accountable. Or if you're a visual person, some people really like the idea of putting a vision board together that has images of what they are aspiring to achieve and having it in a prominent place that you can see it every day. The concept behind this is that as humans, our brains are so full, we're receiving so many messages every day. And if you have a way to continue to just drop that little nugget in of planting the seed for what it is that you're trying to work towards as a reminder, then your daily actions and intentions will move towards that goal. A really important thing, I think, in the age of what I call toxic positivity is not being afraid to change course. So not being afraid of failure, not being afraid of things not working out the way you thought they would. Life is very erratic and changeable all the time. And one of the key things is being comfortable with change and acknowledging that it's not a failure if something happens that sets you off course from your goal. It could be that you're changing direction. It could be that you're pivoting. For me, with my goals, I always try to have a direction that I'm moving towards, but acknowledging that that might change course slightly and that that's okay too. As long as I'm moving in a forward direction, then I think that's the biggest sort of goal for me personally overall. So skill number 4 for leadership is problem solving. So it sounds like a tricky thing, and it can be a bit woolly that people are thinking, well, how do I develop problem solving skills? But it's really important to realize that we are problem solving every single day. So from what to have for dinner, how to work out travel logistics, how to work out finances in our own personal lives, really at its core, problem solving is just evaluating different choices, sometimes researching those choices first to get a full picture, and then deciding which one to go for. So you don't want to get into decision paralysis, and one of the key aspects of leadership is to make a decision usually quite effectively in the time that you have available with the information you have available. Commit to that decision, and if you need to, change path, but sitting with indecision is usually not a good thing. So problems will arise in the workplace from small minor niggles that can have an annoying impact to really big and significant issues. And a key skill to develop is to know when to use your own initiative to solve a problem, when you would have the permission or the authority or the ability to do that, and when it should be escalated. Generally speaking, problems are hassle, and nobody likes hassle. And if you end up working for someone who you're able to solve problems for, trust me, it will be invaluable. We all appreciate people who look for solutions and bring us solutions instead of bringing us more problems. So it'll be very good for yourself and your career. Developing problem solving skills might seem like a bit of a tricky one to do, but one key way to practice is, if an issue or as an issue arises, try coming up with a potential solution and floating it past your manager, assuming the people on this call will have managers in the world of work and aren't going out as the likes of a startup or an entrepreneur themselves. But you know, if you float those potential solutions, you will see what the feedback is, you will see if it's a great idea, you will see if it isn't, and hopefully that person will explain to you why it isn't, to give you more context and deeper insight. And then over time, for given all of those potential solutions, you'll start to develop and hone your own problem solving skills. Neuroscientists have proven that you can't find solutions if you focus on the problem. So if you focus too hard on the problem, especially if it's a firefighting situation where you need to try and resolve something quickly, you'll be overly focused and thinking about the how did it happen, why did it happen, whose fault is it that it happened, instead of just acknowledging that the problem happened and switch to problem solving mode. The second part of that equation is that once the problem has been resolved, you might want to, and it's a good idea, to go back and think about why that problem happened in the first place. And that's where your 5 whys would come in, which is essentially keeping asking why until you get to the root cause of the problem. So, you know, something happened in the workplace. Why did that happen? Well, because someone forgot to order something for a piece of equipment. Well, why did that happen? Because we've no way to set reminders. So you keep going until you can figure out, and then if you solve that issue, it's less likely that the problem that did flag up will happen again. The other side of that is looking at the where, who, how, when, why, what, who, or whom, which is using all of the questions to try and filter out how a problem happened. The other really good thing to use would be all possible solutions, which is an approach so that instead of thinking, oh, I'm not going to suggest that, it's a bit wacky or it's a bit of a crazy idea, you use phrases, and you actually do this, use phrases like, what if we did this? And imagine if that was possible. If you remove boundaries and barriers and constraints on what your problem solving solution is, it could be that it's things that are really, you know, very expensive, or they're really time consuming, or the technology might not even be available yet. But using phrases like that means you're unlocking the creative problem solving part. And some of the best solutions that have come about today came from using this type of approach, and it might have been a crazy idea. You know, when you think back to the personal computer, and the dream that every home would have at least one personal computer. On an average now, every home has around 3 if you count laptops and desktops, and everyone thought it was a crazy idea. Why would anyone want a personal computer? When the iPhone was first launched, you know, it was designed and built in such a way that it was very tight in terms of the technology, but at the time there was a lot of questions over, well, why would you want a computer in your hand? Why do you need apps? We look at life today and wonder how we ever got by without it, but it was such new technology at the time that it wasn't using market research to give customers what they wanted. It was using a gap in the market to give customers what they didn't even know they needed. And that comes from the creative side of the what if and imagine if. So that's some top suggestions. Number 5, the last leadership skill. I'm aware I have about 22 minutes, so I need to get talking quicker for once instead of slower. Learning agility, and to me that's lifelong learning. So staying curious, asking why, seeking out new experiences, putting yourself outside of your comfort zone, and being open to learning new things from all different people, from all different walks of life at all times. I really am not fond of experts who claim to be experts in absolutely everything. There may be a very small handful of people who can truly own that title, but they started out not knowing anything once too. And usually with developments in technology or new research, we uncover something new that makes what was once thought to be true no longer the case. So really important is for you to take control and be proactive and have accountability for your own learning, especially in the workplace. Some employers will be fantastic at doing regular reviews and check-ins with you and acknowledging and recognizing when you have potential that isn't being maximized or explored. In some cases, they won't. And it's not necessarily that they're doing it intentionally. It's just recognizing that your own future, your leadership capability really is the responsibility of you, so that you can recognize when the time comes that you think you should develop new skill sets or continue to develop ones that you're currently building. A popular fact that does get thrown about is that CEOs read on average 4 to 5 books a month, which you think would make my book heart happy, but further digging meant that this couldn't be verified. But studies do indicate that children who read more books are likely to earn more as adults, and there's a wide depth of information available and research on the different sort of promotion capabilities and leadership capabilities of individuals who are active learners. And again, that doesn't just have to be books, especially not today. So to develop that, podcasts, videos, formal training, informal training, self-teaching, and even definitely some games in terms of strategy games and different things can help to boost your experiences and your learning. We're all about doing things quicker, easier, more efficiently. So try a life hack and get yourself a mentor. It could be through a formal mentoring program. It could be informal. It could be just finding someone who is further along the career path that you're intending to go down, or has a particular sort of personality trait or skill set that you would really like to develop, and reach out, ask if you can take them for a coffee, ask if you can take them out for lunch, and see if you can develop that relationship. Informal, some of my best mentors probably wouldn't have called themselves my mentor, nor did I identify it as that kind of relationship until recently. So it's really having someone who can see your potential, is a bit of an advocate in your corner, that you know you can go to and rely on for some advice. Generally speaking, the mentor relationship, over time you might outgrow that mentor in terms of professionally, but you will never lose the relationship that was built as a result. So mentors are really important. Definitely be open to trying new things and making mistakes. Don't be afraid of failure. Don't be afraid of just trying something and thinking, no, it wasn't quite what I thought it was going to be. We'll change track. And certainly over the years of being a recruiter, being involved in employment, the right attitude and having an openness and willingness to learn is really important for a lot of employers, especially where there's skill shortages today in the hard skills and in the technical skills. You know, an employer will usually tell you that someone who is open to learning, they'll be able to teach the skills to, but someone who isn't, they never will. And just one point on that in terms of a life hack and trying to get as many insights as possible from people who have been there and done things. Stephen Bartlett's The Diary of a CEO on YouTube would be a really good recommendation, a really different, diverse group of people that he interviews on that channel. So slight porcupine at the start of the session, we have a 6th that I'm just going to throw in, which is becoming really, really important, and that is digital capability, which, as we've seen from today's session, with making sure that you're familiar with software packages and how they work. It's not about being a software engineer or a coder or a cryptocurrency or a blockchain engineer. It's not about necessarily being within the digital field, but a digital skill set will always stand you in good stead, especially going forward. The rate of change, the adoption of digital is not going to go in reverse. So different roles, it's very difficult and challenging because different roles will require different skill sets. I've included their specialist skills as an example, could be website development, social media management. I have a background in marketing and digital marketing, so those are skill sets that would be very valued in that space. In other sectors, be it pharmaceutical or healthcare or engineering, it'll be different digital skills, which is why it's so challenging, because they're no longer linear and just a generalized skill set. But in terms of a general digital skill set, if you think of it as using different digital devices, software programs, and different networks to work and engage digitally and manage information digitally, it's about being open to learning those as well, and also trying to keep yourself fresh with some of the developments so that it's not daunting whenever you do have to maybe upskill into a new program or transition those skills across. So definitely digital capability, especially going into leadership positions where more and more leaders are having to make decisions that affect the organization. Which software do we invest in? You know, how do we train the team and transition so that the change is accepted and that it's actually used? There's lots of need to understand a bigger digital ecosystem as you move into leadership positions. So just a quick one, is it easy to develop leadership skills? From our survey, one of the questions was, I know where for help developing my leadership skills or how to develop them. And it was a really varied mix across the board, a little bit more to the lower end of the scale than the upper. So although everyone or most people were very comfortable with what leadership skills are, and very varied response in understanding that you have strong leadership skills and confident to use them. That was quite a broad mix. The really interesting part is that when it comes to knowing where to go to help develop them, it wasn't as confident an answer. So hopefully this presentation has given some insight and some resources to signpost you to for where you can start to develop those. But one of the things to acknowledge really is that most of, if not all of the leadership skills are soft skills. And they really need to rebrand that, because soft skills are generally the harder skills to master. Hard skills are teachable, they're job specific, it's to do with completing certain tasks. Usually you can quantify, can someone do it or not? How quickly can they do it? Soft skills, which are normally people skills or interpersonal skills, really require a lot of effort to develop and happen over time. There's not often a way to really hack that process. They're experiential, and how you use your soft skills will change depending on the environment and the situation and the circumstances. And the best way to develop those is to put yourself in as many varied situations and have as many new experiences as possible. So don't beat yourself up over not maybe being able to crack a soft skill very quickly. Little bit of interactivity here at the minute, so there is a method to the madness, bear with me. For this part, if you want to put a camera on, if you don't, if you want to just call out or put in the chat box, one of the things that is said a lot today is if you can't see it, you can't be it. And I think that's really true. Role models are really, really important. And traditionally, being a leader, and the word leader was, I've got someone who's spotted that they're all men. They are indeed. There is a purpose. So traditionally, being a leader was synonymous with being male. When people said leader and leadership, in terms of whether it's considered a masculine or feminine trait, it was usually identified as a masculine trait. There have been pioneers and outliers, but even today, there is a significant gender bias in leadership. And there's also a massive lack of diversity among those people that are identified as leaders, but more so the ones that the likes of the media will give more airtime to or portray more frequently. So one of the quick things, super quickly, I wanted to do is say what you see. So can you call out or pop into the chat box the names of the leaders on this slide? Any that you know, one at a time, all at once, whatever way works for you. Oh, we got Lord Sugar, not even Alan Sugar. He's getting his full title. Middle-aged and old. I didn't say it. I was going to say a name, but centre at the bottom wouldn't be just quite as old. Well, there's a question mark over some of them that were put in intentionally. Can you consider them as leaders? But we all have our opinions. So far we're naming, yeah, we've got Boris Johnson, we've got Richard Branson. Anybody want to like literally call out so I can hear a voice? You feel free. Oh, we've got someone wanting to win a prize here. Gates, Biden, Branson, Sugar, Johnson, Zuckerberg, Jones. Excellent. It's like a song. Very good. So we're still going. So what does leadership look like? This is really, really important. Change can be very slow. And for a lot of people, leadership seems like it's too far away, it's too impossible. You don't have representation of leaders that follow a similar journey or narrative to you. And we are starting to see more diversity in leadership, but still nowhere near enough. So key aspect of this challenge, name the leaders on this slide. And let's see how many we can get. Got Barack Obama, happens to be male, but we'll forgive him for that one. Okay, we've got Kamala Harris. Excellent. We've got 4. Yeah, we've got 4 named there. Bit slower with the responses on this one, which is interesting. Yep. Okay, so a couple of things. Yes, top left is the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, or Ardern. We also have, as I go from left to right, Congresswoman Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, which someone has named. A couple of people have named, which is great. We've obviously got Barack Obama, he's probably one of the most popular. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is the Supreme Court judge on the right, who was the first Jewish woman and only the second woman to ever serve on the Supreme Court. Bottom left, interesting, Stephen Bartlett. I thought more people might have known him from Dragon's Den, really young entrepreneur that did fantastically well. And the 2 really interesting ones for me at the bottom, we have Ursula Burns, who is a prior CEO of Xerox, was also a director in Uber and American Express, and was rated by Forbes in 2014 as the 22nd most powerful woman in the world. I've never met anyone yet who can tell me who Ursula Burns is when they see a photo of her. In terms of tech startups, we obviously all know Zuckerberg. We talk about Bill Gates. We've got Elon Musk. Bottom right, has anyone ever used a program called Canva? Or a piece of software called Canva? No, some people have said no. So Canva is a really popular basic graphic design software. It has 60 million monthly active users, and last year was valued at $40 billion. That's Melanie Perkins. She's currently 34. She's the CEO and the only female co-founder of Canva. She's one of the youngest female CEOs of a tech startup ever, valued at over $1 billion, and is among just 2% of venture-backed companies with a female CEO. So there's a lot of talk at the minute in terms of how much investment goes into female-led organizations. But I would say Melanie Perkins is a pretty fantastic entrepreneur, and sadly her story isn't as widely known or shared as much or given as much attention. So I think it's really important in terms of leadership that we seek out the outliers, that we recognize their achievements, but also look for leaders that you can identify with. The journey to leadership for everyone doesn't follow the same path. It won't have the same barriers. And I think it's really important that we just acknowledge that, yes, a lot of the leaders that we look to currently may be inspirational and may be ones that you would look up to, but also to just take it that wee step further and see who you can identify and find that it's a journey and a narrative that's worth seeing and worth identifying with and sharing. So purpose for that was I want to leave with just a message in terms of everyone has the potential to be a leader. It's not something that's reserved for a particular subset of society or a rare few. And the question to ask you is, if not now, when? And if not you, who? So that is the end of my presentation. I have just popped another very quick, I think it's another 5-question survey into the chat box. It's a mixture of being able to get some feedback on where you are now in terms of your thought process on leadership compared to at the start of the presentation, and also just some useful feedback for me as well for going forward, because again, doing learning agility and being a proactive and lifelong learner, if I don't ask for feedback from you, then I will not be able to improve. So thank you very much, everyone. And if there are any questions, I haven't been able to follow the chat as of Norman. So if there's anything that has come up, can you draw it out for me, or even if anyone has something to, and come on and say hello. That would be something.
There haven't been too many mics. So no, the chat's mainly sort of technical difficulties and a few other things, and conversations amongst people, which has been really
Fabulous.
great. I have to say, Rachel, some amazing thought-provoking stuff there, and particularly at the end, because I was thinking, is that Jacinta Ardern? Because I was kind of looking and I
Well,
was thinking,
that one mixed with, if anyone knows me personally, the slide with all of the male leaders, my dissertation's on women in leadership. So I
right.
knew that would cause my eyebrows would have raised if I was listening to the presentation, but it was done with intention. But
Oh no
yeah,
no no!
absolutely.
Absolutely
Any
fantastic. It's
question?
funny. It didn't. I know. Well, I've been in New Zealand a few times, and I kind of keep an eye on their politics and economics and stuff. But I was kind of, is that Jacinta Ardern? It's kind of, is it? Is it not? Kind of thing. But no, really interesting, Rachel. And it was funny because one of the things that you mentioned is you can't be what you can't see. As an employability and careers consultant, and in terms of widening participation and people, to me that's my kind of go-to mantra. You can't be what you can't see. You can't explore opportunities if you can't become something if you're not exploring opportunities at the end of the day. And I think I could bore you to death with careers theory, and I'm sure you know plenty of it yourself. In terms of but if your background, and my father was a joiner, my uncle was a bricklayer, my other uncle was a plumber, my mother was a housewife. That was my sphere growing up, and it was only really, I suppose, when I kind of went to university and started to explore options and think about, oh my God, academia, and these kind of degrees and masters and PhDs, and that kind of world was opened up to me. And I think one of the things that I've said is, if you're not engaging in career exploration or career action planning and setting those smart goals, you're not aware of opportunities. And when you're not aware of opportunities, you're not putting yourself outside of your comfort zone, and you're not gaining the full. I talk about people's academic career, but you're not gaining that full experience in terms of developing those leadership skills, developing your emotional intelligence, understanding and applying that then to you as an individual in terms of your own continuous professional development and your lifelong learning, everything that you talked about. So Rachel, thank you so
No
much. That
problem
was
at all. It was good. It was
absolutely
good. Of course,
fantastic.
Norman, I've got more to say because why wouldn't you? Number one skill set with me. Actually, it's something I mentioned in the TED talk. I was told in school all the time that I talk too much and was I could easily distract the other students. And I love the fact now that I've kind of made a career out of
Career.
it.
Brilliant.
The two things on that one, I think, is in Northern Ireland. I just know as well, Rebecca's popped a question in that I want to come back to. But in Northern Ireland, we do have what people think of as a very humble nature. And it's usually a quality that is liked in us. But it is, especially in today's society, it can be very limiting in holding us back because we do have that mindset of, oh, sure, you're 23, how could you start a business? Or any number of things you could think of. I recently spoke to a guy who was doing an apprenticeship with a local company, fantastic opportunity, really wasn't enjoying it, decided to go and do chemical engineering, moved down south to go to, I think it was Cork University, got a placement year in Procter & Gamble and has now been offered a graduate position in their, I think it's Germany or Sweden, one or the other, on like 70,000 a year, with
Wow.
travel to their France. He was doing, and it was still a great opportunity. He was going to be an apprentice with a local manufacturing company, still great. But he just went after it, and at 25, 26 years of age, is going to be travel in different countries with one of the world's largest companies.
Absolutely.
So it is that mindset, just that it doesn't happen to people in Northern Ireland. And I think that's something too in terms of role models I want to share more, is the big success stories and the big people who follow their dreams. The other side of it, unfortunately, I could do a whole separate talk on women in leadership and women in industry as well. Happens with men too, but typically more so with women, is imposter syndrome. And
Yes.
sometimes, reaching out for the opportunities, identifying how you want to develop yourself, speaking assertively to your company, is all well and good if you've got the confidence to do so, and the experience and the wisdom that comes from those experiences, and understanding your competence level that you can do these things to back it up. So it kind of all comes as part and parcel. Just in terms of Rebecca's question as well, any recommendations on how to find out what specific skills and qualities different genres of work look for? So there's two things on that. One is more and more research right now into the future of work is I did a focus group with about 15 of Northern Ireland's largest employers from all different sectors, and we tried to drill down into what the skills were that they were looking for, and they were equally as surprised as I was to find out that they were all the same. And part of the war on talent at the minute is that a lot of the companies are looking for a lot of the same skill sets in the future of work, and it's usually the soft skills, your problem solving, your communication, your creative thinking, those types of skills. Industry specific will usually be much better known, unless it's a really uncommon type of job. So things like if you want to go into nursing or veterinary or accountancy, there's a very clear career path for it because the qualifications line right up. There are things that maybe aren't just as linear as that anymore. And I would say if you have a broad understanding, first of all, look at your own strengths and look at your own skill sets and interests, because anything that you want to go into should and will lead from what your own strengths are. But secondly, Google is your number one friend. Recruiters and careers resources, like I'm sure there's a lot of fabulous career staff in Ulster and in other establishments that can help with that. And also, if you identify a company that you think you might like to work for or that's in that sector, you'd be amazed if you reach out and be proactive and speak to a HR person or someone who works in that company and ask them for 10 or 15 minutes of their time to find out, to ask, can I come in and have a chat with you? One, they'll be really taken aback by your proactivity, and you might even find yourself being offered a job. But if you don't ask, you don't get. And if someone came to me and said, I'd love to be a marketer, could you tell me about it? Because it was a large part of my background, I'd absolutely give them 10 or 15 minutes to do that. So don't be afraid to use all of the resources that are available to you. I think, is your name Eilish? You've put in speaking from experience. I'm not entirely sure. I've just checked, that is the TED Talk. So yeah, speaking from experience in terms of... I should come back, Eilish.
Speaking in experience about, it was just a random comment, sorry.
Oh no, it's just in case what it was, the topic that
there was a question mark. Sorry, there was I think that was the question mark. Might have led it to be slightly confusing. Just come back on what you said there. Sorry, jump in, Rachel. Had you finished?
No, just I was going to elaborate if there was a query around what it was. I was just going to elaborate there if you wanted me to. I've just popped that wee survey in again. We had 28 do the first survey, and I've got 23 on the second one at the minute. So for those still on the call, thank you very much also for still sticking around this afternoon. For those still on the call, please do complete that wee feedback survey for me at the end. But I don't know, Norman, if we're tight. I know my next speaker.
We are a wee bit tight for time. Just very briefly, I wanted to say there in relation to what you'd mentioned in terms of Rebecca's question, in terms of recommendations. I'm sure you're aware of the World Economics Forum, skills for tomorrow, kind of the 2025. I've put the link in there. But a really great resource and one that we would use, obviously I'm involved in employability and careers within Ulster, is Prospects Careers Advice. What can I do with my degree? When you look at that particular link and go into your particular degree program, it'll give you a list of occupations, directly related to your degree and indirectly related to your degree. Now, it's not prescriptive at the end of the day, but when you click on those, then it talks about the skills aligned or the proficiencies aligned to those particular roles, and it's focusing really on the soft skills. The other thing that I would say is look at the professional bodies associated with your degree. So, for example, the biomedical science, the likes of the IBMS, they'll produce a list of proficiencies. And those are, again, when they talk about proficiencies, they're aligned to the kind of soft skills in terms of the interpersonal communication, negotiation, persuasion, influence, all of those types of things. And it really helps you to understand those. Again, even within your own employability portal here at Ulster, when you go into the employability journey, journey. It looks at, particular skills and understanding what they are and how you develop them. But I think one of the major takeaways is, that there is that academic side of your career, but you're also afforded a whole range of opportunities while you're an undergraduate and a postgraduate as well, in terms of thinking, the likes of the University Officer Training Corps that I mentioned, or the Air Squadron, or the Navy, and things you can do co-curricular and extracurricular to put yourself outside of your comfort zone, so that you have that breadth of experiences from which you can draw upon in terms of articulating where those skills have developed from. So that was very brief, and we're running a wee bit past time, but hopefully everybody sorted the survey. Other session then running this afternoon, just to promote that there, the link's up there. You can join it directly. It's starting in about 12 minutes. And again, then tomorrow, there's the session that we were meant to be having this afternoon. We've had to change it, as I say. The speaker's been stuck at an airport, but that'll go up again. If you just check tomorrow morning, first thing at the ulster.ac.uk/skills week, you'll see that other thing that's put in there. Stella's put it in there. Brilliant, Stella. It just leaves me to say, Rachel Doherty, thank you so much. Again, brilliant. I've heard you speak before. I could listen to you for a long time.
Norman, just really, I know, I'm sorry, I'm going to talk again just really quickly. I've just thrown my LinkedIn profile in there, so anyone who wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, please do so. And now I'm going to shut up.
Do you know what? We're only 5 minutes over time. So Rachel, and you and I are both in the same book. And look, I've said this before. We could talk for Europe when it comes to these types of things. And they're really, really important. And that's why we run these types of weeks, and that's why we get people like you and Rachel, to have these conversations with the students in terms of motivating, inspiring, the think about what it is that they need to be doing in addition to their degree program. At the end of the day, the degree's there, and when we talk about that employability equation, yes, it's the academic qualification, yes, it's the work experience, paid or voluntary, yes, it's the strategies that they employ, but it's also about developing that confidence. And one of the things, when I was kind of looking at your presentation when you'd sent it to me, I was kind of thinking, look at all of those people, both the men and the women, in slides 22, 23. The one thing that I would suggest that they have in common is, confidence, but lots of failures along the way there too as well. And that that confidence is developed as we grow, but we grow when we put ourselves outside of our comfort zone.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's about. And again, it's that reciprocal process. You become more confident, therefore you engage with other things. Therefore you become more confident, therefore you engage with other things. It's always a plus at the end of the day. But listen, I'm going to love you and leave you, Rachel.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, everybody, for engaging and completing the surveys. It was lovely.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And again, I will now stop the recording.